Hello everyone, welcome to the fifth chapter of the course Integrated Marketing Communication. So under this chapter we are going to study how we measure the effectiveness of promotional campaign or promotional program. I'm Wonderson Delam. After the completion of this presentation we are going to understand three major objectives or three major topics. The first one is we discuss about the arguments for and against measuring the effectiveness of promotion program. So in this case I'm going to justify the reason why companies engage to measure the effectiveness of their promotional campaign, and the other one is I'm going to explain the reason why not they are not going to measure their the effectiveness of their advertisement or promotion. The second objective deals with explain how to conduct research to measure advertising effectiveness. So in this case, today we are going to study these four questions or answer these four questions when we are talking about or when we have a plan to measure the effectiveness of advertisement or any promotion campaign. First, we have to answer what should be tested, when to test, or which means the time that we are going to undertake the research. The third one is where to test, is it in laboratory or in the field test, and finally how it will be undertaken or conducted. So this dealing with the guidelines and the research methodology that we are going to employ. So in the second part I'm going to explain how we conduct research to measure the effectiveness of our promotion campaign or advertisement campaign. The third step or the third objective of our today discussion is with the testing processes. So in this case marketers or professionals engage to measure the effectiveness of their advertisement or promotion program, starting from the concept generation research or the concept testing up to the market testings of advertisement commercial. So in this case they follow the following four steps, starting from the concept to rough and pre-finished art copy evaluation, finished art commercial pre-testing, and before implemented to the actual scene, and finally there is also market testing of advertisement commercial or post-testing, which means we also undertake the evaluation after the promotion is already publicized to the society. Then I'm going to explain these steps and the associated methodologies that we employ in each stage of the testing process. Before I'm starting my presentation, first let me discuss with this quote, and it quote means the entire direction of this chapter, or it becomes the rationale of this chapter. So accordingly, David Ogilvy says, advertising peoples who ignore research are as dangerous as generals who ignore the codes of enemy signals. This quote indicates advertisement peoples need to undertake research in order to understand whether their advertisement or their promotion program is effective or not. So in this case, for example, these two peoples, like the advertising people and the generals, they are strategists. They make their decisions in a competitive environment, and at the same time they also undertake their entire activities in the stiff environment. Therefore they need information about the landscape they are in order to realize their objective. So in this case, as a good marketer and as a good advertising personnel, first we need to understand where we are, which means to what extent we meet our advertisement objective. That is the first objective of studying this chapter. The other one is it also becomes a very input to the next advertisement campaign. So in this case, measuring the effectiveness of advertisement is important to study whether we are effective or not, and the other one is we can also learn from our current failures and mistakes and experiences, and using these failures or success as an input to the next advertisement campaign or program. So which means measuring the effectiveness of the promotional program it's a critical element in the promotional planning process, and mostly we need to employ researches that allow us to gather specific information about the specific programs of the advertisement programs or the communication programs. So in this case, we can learn from our failure and successes. Okay, let's go to the first objective of this chapter. You know, there is an argument or debate in measuring the effectiveness of promotion programs. Some argue that it's better to conduct research or measure the effectiveness of the advertisement or the communication campaign. The other says they are not recommend or prescribe to undertake measurement in the promotional effectiveness. So let's discuss these arguments one by one. For example, there is peoples which support the measurement of communication effectiveness or advertisement effectiveness, and they have the following reasons. For example, the first one is they measure the effectiveness of their advertisement. It's because they want to avoid a costly mistakes. So you know, as I said earlier, we undertake the measurement of our effectiveness just to take experiences from our failures. So in this case, sometimes companies may measure their advertisement activities in each stage, starting from the concept generation to the final stage, because they want to minimize the costs they invest. It's because the failure that happened in the production of the advertisement. So in this case, to avoid these kinds of mistakes, they are going to measure their advertisement in the pre-testing and at the post-testing periods. Before they launch the advertisement, they test it. The other one is even they also test the advertisement after the advertisement is commercialized to the society. So in this case, they can avoid mistakes or costs, whether to the current time and the future. The other one is they can also evaluating alternative strategies. Sometimes we can combine various communication tools so as to come up with a better communication effect. So in this case, we can whether we are measuring the effectiveness of the entire communication program that we undertake, it becomes the very input to evaluate alternative strategies, which means which one of the promotion program, like the sales promotion, the personal selling, the public relation, or the advertisement, may bring a better results. And at the same time, we can also select a better strategies in terms of media type. Which media type gets better communication effect and sales effect. So the point is, when we are undertaking such kinds of evaluation in the advertisement process, we can even evaluate alternative future strategies. Which strategy is better and which strategy is poor or earn less results. The third one is increase the efficiency of advertising in general. It's obvious in general we also have a plan to increase the efficiency of our advertisement, which means minimizing our expenditures in terms of financial expenditures, time, information, and other resources. So if we have such kinds of evaluation systems or monitoring system in our organization, we take a lot of input to minimize the future expenditures of undertaking, or we can minimize unnecessary expenditure that we invest to manage the advertisement program. The final one is determine if objectives are achieved. This is the most important reason. Avoiding costly mistakes. Sometimes if the company has sufficient financial status, it couldn't be an issue. Evaluating alternative strategies, yes. But when we see the last reason, it's about the objective of the organization. As I mentioned in the previous chapters, organizations have hierarchical objectives. So these hierarchical objectives starts from the operational objectives up to the corporate objective. So if the marketing, the advertisement objective is successful, it becomes a very input to realize the success of promotional objective, marketing objectives, and corporate objectives. The point is, they determine whether their objectives are achieved or not, which means whether their advertisement campaigns communicate customers properly, which means giving awareness about our brands, and the other one is whether it also increases the benefit of sales volume of the company, the profit or the brand equity of the company. by considering this in mind, the companies engage to measure the effectiveness of advertisement. The other categories of groups says they are not going to measure their effectiveness of their advertisement is because of this reason. The first one is cost of measurement. Sometimes the cost may outweigh the benefit of studying or the benefit of measuring that particular advertisement, because by its very nature research have a lot of expenditures. It needs or it demands a lot of time, money and human resources. So in this case, it's because of this reason the resource issues led the companies to hesitate or undertake to conduct research whether to understand their advertisement is effective or not. Rather, they simply use their own intuition. The other one is problem with research. Sometimes research methodologies also lack a genuine or attractive result to the marketers, because sometimes we are engaged to employ various research designs, whether they are descriptive research design, exploratory or inferential research design. But by its very nature, these three types of research design have their own limitation, and we are not dependable on the result that we earn or get from the methodologies. It's due to this reason, because the research information is not that much conclusive and controlling the environmental influences, they are not going to study research or conduct research and measure the effectiveness of their advertisement. The other one is this disagreement about what to test. Sometimes in the research committee or the measurement committee may disagree about what to test. In fact, there is no scientific argument that what to test, because in the next part of our today's discussion I am going to explain what to test. So what should be tested. So we can test the source, we can test the media, we can test the budget, and we can also test the message. But the very problem is they disagree about what things to be measured at this stage. So it's because of this disagreement they are not going to measure the effectiveness of advertisement. Creative objectives. Sometimes the creative unit also object that no one is going to measure the effectiveness of their creative arts or creative outputs. One of the reasons is that creative tasks are something subjective, so it becomes very difficult to measure subjective variables or subjective concepts in simple researches. So it's because of the objection they have, or because of the objection of creative teams or creative writers, companies not in a position to measure its effectiveness. And finally, it's because of lack of time. As you know, our business environment is extremely competitive and dynamic, and at the same time it's complex. So in order to cope up with this dynamic or complex environment, we need to come up with a decision which is quick enough or fast enough to cope up with the change that happen in our environment. So it's because of this reason sometimes the company is not going to measure or conduct such kinds of research to measure the effectiveness of their advertisement. So in this case, they drop the activities of measuring the effectiveness of advertisement and using their personal intuition or experiences to measure whether they are effective or not. So shortage of time also becomes the other reason that the companies is not going to measure the advertisement effectiveness. Okay, let's go to the next part of our today discussion. So the next part is about conducting researches to measure the advertisement effectiveness. So in this case, today we are going to see the following four major pointers. The first question is, when we are talking about the measurement of advertisement effectiveness, first we need to answer what to test. So in this case, the source, message, media and budget factors should be measured. The other one is where to test. Are we engaged to test whether the source or the budget in the laboratory setting or in the field setting? The other one is we also determine the time being when So when to test? Is it pre-testing or post-testing? Shall we engage to measure the effectiveness of our advertisement before it's communicated to the society or the public, or after the message is disseminated to the society? And finally, we also answer the fourth question, how to test. So developing a testing guidelines and appropriate methods, or selecting the right testing guidelines and methods to undertake the research or to measure the effectiveness of the campaign. Let's discuss these points one by one. The first one is what to test. Now we are going to measure the source, the message, the media, and budget. So in this case, source are those people who is selected to, who is engaged to spoke or communicate the message of our advertisement. So in this case, it can be models, or it can be any typical humans is assigned to demonstrate the message that the advertiser is going to disseminate to the society. So in this case, sometimes the likability of the source, the model, or its attractiveness, its credibility, and other things become the main factor that we are going to measure whether our advertisement is, to know whether our advertisement is effective or not. It's because people might have concern about the source factors. The other one is we also measure the message variables. So in this case, what should be measured in the message variables? The very objective of message variables means it is delivering the positioning statement or the message of the company to the customers. So this is the most important point. So in this case, is it readable? Is it strong enough that the customers can understand and it change their interests, it grabs their attentions, or is it memorable, or is it attractive, and other things could be measured. And to what extent it's have the right appealing? Is it the rational appealing or the emotional appealing? And to what extent these appeals also have an effect on the customers' understanding and buying decisions? So the message variables should be measured. It could be strengths, their memorability, and other things. The other what to be tested is the media strategies. So as you know, we have two broad categories of medias, like the personal one and the non-personal one. The personal medias are those media that the communicator and the target customers have a direct interaction. The other one is a mass communication tools. So in this case, media strategy is also the other thing that we have to measure which categories of media strategies in media classes may give us the right the communication effects or coverage, and at the same time which subclasses. Is it newspaper or magazines? Is it which newspaper particularly have a better communication effects on our message, and in which location? Is it the front page or the back page of the journal or the magazine that we can effectively communicate? And the size of the billboard, or the size or the length of time that we advertise. These and other issues might be the concern of media strategies. So considering the media reach, the media coverage, the media cost, and other things, we can also measure whether our advertisement is effective or not in terms of the media strategies of the companies. And finally, budget also becomes the issue, the topic that we are going to study. So in this case, how much budget were invested to that particular advertisement campaign, and we also measure how much return that the companies may earn after the implementation of the advertisement campaign. So what the cause and effect relationship of expenditures and benefits, expenditures and communication effect. So now we are going to measure the results of the output of our expenditures with respect to our communication objectives or advertisement objectives. So to wrap up, when we are talking about conducting research, now we are going to measure the budget, the media strategy, the message variables, and the source, which means the model who is supposed to communicate or present the message to the target audiences. The other one is where to test. Okay, if we know what kinds of variable that we are going to study, is it better to employ laboratory test or field test? So as you know, these two broad categories of research types also have their own peculiar advantage and disadvantage. So let's discuss this one by one. So as you know, laboratory test means now we are going to find a separate location which is controlled from various extraneous variables and uncontrolled situations. So in this case now the researcher can particularly select the particular response that the customers have about our advertisement. So in this case, by its very nature, laboratory testing applied in various types of fields, in social science and at the same time in natural science. So in this case, for example, we can test the customer's responses by pupil dilations, eye tracking, galvanic response, and other, creating an artificial environment which seems the normal environment. Then now that we can specifically measure what we want to measure from the respondents. So when we are employing the laboratory test, one of the benefits is now we have the right or the privilege to control the research activities. As I said earlier, we can avoid any extraneous variables that affect the response of the customers or affect the output of the customers. The other disadvantage means the disadvantage of laboratory testing is it lacks realism. It's not seems like the natural environment. So sometimes people may scrutinize their output. It's because they are not delivering or giving response to the question of the researcher in the unfamiliar environment. Their answer might be biased, and at the same time they believe that they are in the testing process. So due to this reason, they also adapt or change their results or their responses to the researcher, even though there is some specific methods that can avoid these kinds of responses. So to wrap up, when we are using laboratory tests, now we can control various extraneous and uncontrolled variables compared to the field research, and at the same time its disadvantages, it can have some sort of test bias because the research environment is not looking the natural viewing situation. The other is a field test. Field tests are tests of the advertisement or commercial under natural viewing situation. So now we measure the customer's responses to our advertisement in the realism of noise, distractions, and the comfort of home. Now the customer feel that they are in their homes, still distractions are there, and noises also happen. But the very point is the customers may feel that, or the target respondent may feel that they are in their natural environment, and they believe that they also have the comfort of home. So when we see it's a disadvantage, when we see it's an advantage, it's a natural. So now sometimes they can avoid biases because they have a freedom to answer or respond their answer. They can provide genuine information compared to the laboratory testing. When you see it's a disadvantage, it's lack of control. Now it may be impossible to isolate cause of viewers evaluation. If the typical event occurred during the test, they may bias the results, and at the same time it usually takes more time and money to conduct, because when we are employing a field tests, we can heading in different direction, finding the customers, and then gathering a lot of information from those customers. So it may jump in the budgets of our researchers. The other one is the time when to test, pre-tests and post-tests. So pre-testing may occur in the number of points. For example, the idea generation stage, rough execution stage, or the final version before it's implemented. The idea could be tested, and the idea will be turned into rough execution. This rough execution can also be tested, and the final version before it's disseminated to the society. It could also be tested. So in this case, we can measure the basic idea, the positioning statement, the layout, storyboards. You know, it depends on the stage that we undertake the measurement. The idea generation stage, we can measure the idea and basic concepts. When we are rough execution, positioning statements, the final stage, the TV commercial, the storyboard, and animatics, and else could be studied. When you see the post-testing, now we undertake the testing after the commercial were disseminated to the society. It's also common for both advertisers and agencies, without exception of testing of commercial for we hold. It's a common stage of evaluation for many organizations. So its objective is just to determine whether we are effective or not. Post-testing is designed to measure we are effective or not. In this respect, we consider the communication objective of the companies, which means we make sure that we are achieving the communication objective of the organization or not. The other one is it also serves as an input to the next advertisement campaign. So it becomes a situational analysis, or it becomes the very input to the next situational analysis activities. So pre-testing and post-testing. Pre-testing means it is the testing that we undertake before the commercial is commercialized to the society. Post-testing is undertaken after the commercials are circulated or commercialized to the society. The last question is how to test. So in this case, when we are talking about this answer a question, now we are also talking about a guideline. So positioning, advertising, copy testing means it is a guideline. So this guideline comprises a set of principles or criteria. It's aimed at improving the research used in preparing and testing ads. So one of the major problem of measuring the advertisement is the research problem, as I mentioned earlier. And most companies or most organization is not going to conduct research because there is a research problem. To avoid these problems, we need to set a criteria, and these sets of criteria or guidelines improve the way how we undertake the research and testing the ads. So this pact, the concept of pact or positioning, advertising, copy testing pact, have the following 9 principles. So let me give you a highlight here, and you have to read the in-depth thing that is incorporated here. For example, when you see the number 4, it should be based on a model of human response to communication. So there are 3 different types of human communication models, like traditional hierarchy models and hierarchy models and cognitive models that we already learned in the 2nd chapter. So these kinds of models need to be applied according to the guidelines. So when we are engaged to measure or undertake the researches to measure the effectiveness of advertisement, we have to use one of the models, whether it's traditional or the modern or the cognitive one. When we see the first one, provide measurement relevant to the objective of the advertising, we have to set a measurement criteria which is related to the advertisement objectives. Which means we are not going to measure other things or the various things that we are interested for, but according to the guideline, we have to measure the advertisement effectiveness based on the objective of the research or based on the objective of the advertisement. Require agreement on how results will be used before each test. The other one is provide a multiple measures. When we see the third, multiple measures must be commendable. So to avoid the problems of validity and reliability, we are going to undertake a multiple measures. Single measures are not advocated, which means, for example, when we are undertaking a pre-testing, we have to undertake the testing in various locations and employing various methods to come up with a better or conclusive results. When you see 5, consider multiple versus single exposure to the stimuli. The stimulus, which means we have to let the customers to visualize or to read the newspaper or to the commercials in a multiple times to come up with a better results. Require alternative execution to have the same degree to finish. Provide control to avoid bad effects of exposure. Just the other one is it's better to avoid bias. So by its very nature, much of the research methodologies have biasness. So in this case, we have to develop a controlling mechanism to avoid biasness. When you see 8, take into account the basic consideration of sample definition, the sampling method, and the sample size must be properly applied. The sample size must be adequate or sufficient, and we need to apply the right sampling method, the right selection procedure, which have less bias and which gives the higher representation of the population. Finally, demonstrate reliability and validity test. The research results or the data collection process must fulfill the reliability and validity measures. So there is a science that we can apply to measure the reliability and validity of our researches. So this is all about the second objective of the field chapter. The third objective deals with the testing process. So in this case there are 4 steps here. We undertake the testing process. We start the testing process at the concept generation research, then rough pre-finished art, copy, and other commercial testing. The third step deals with finished arts or commercial pre-testing, and the last one is market testing of arts or commercials, like post-testing. Let's discuss this point one by one. The first stage is 1, concept testing, concept generation, and concept testing. So the concept testing is conducted in the early stage of the campaign developmental process. This is the early stage. Now we develop the concept of advertisement. So what would be its objective? The objective is to explore the consumer's response to the potential advertisement campaign. Now, to avoid a costly mistakes, even we undertake the testing at this stage. So now the concept is expressed in words, pictures, or symbols. So at this level we can just simply understand what the customers may respond to the concept that we embark or develop. So by gathering feedback at this stage, we can modify or change situation according to the research undertaking that we have. And at the same time, we use this testing to have the customers evaluate advertisement alternatives. So if they have various alternatives, now they can have the chance to give us the needed input. So what should be tested in this stage? Positioning statements, the copy, headlines, illustrations, even color, print typeface, package designs, even point of purchase materials. Some of important inputs of the advertisement at the preliminary level might be tested here, and most of the time we can use a focus group discussion, direct questioning, or survey methods can be applied here. But most of the time the companies apply a focus group discussion at this stage, selecting few representative respondents, then using those respondents to deliberate on the positioning statement to the point of purchase material of the company. But its objective is just to rectify the problems that will deteriorate the quality of our advertisement campaign in the next step or the final step. When it comes to the second one, rough art, pre-finished commercials, copy, and commercial testing. So now the concept also turned into rough arts, turned into pre-finished copy or commercial testing, commercials. So now we are going to test here. Now we are going to measure the slide of the artwork posted on a screen. Animatic and photomatic graphs might be used to test at this stage, so we can apply both the lab setting and field tests. Simply now we study or measure the effectiveness of the animatic outputs, which means the rough artworks or the photomatic graphs might be tested. So in this case we have 2 broad methods here: comprehension in reaction tests and consumer juries method. When it comes to the comprehension reaction test, now our ultimate goal is just to measure whether the customers may convey the right meaning for our advertisement, because sometimes people may understand the meaning of our advertisement in a wrong way, or in something that the company is not thinking about. So we measure how the message is conveyed to the customers, which means how they understand it, or what kinds of perception they have about the message that we design in our advertisement. The second objective is just to measure the reaction the advertisement generate. So sometimes our advertisement may generate negative reaction. It's because the message may have a bad influences on the religion, the gender, other issues, which is the main concern of the society. So in this case, we have to measure its reaction. So if the reaction is good, now we have to proceed our activities. And if they convey the message properly, yes, the advertisement also fulfill the requirement in terms of its comprehension and tastes. Reaction activities. The other one is consumer juries. This method is almost similar with the above one, but the difference is now they select consumer representatives. They select respondent which represent the society, and most of the time they are a customer of the companies, to evaluate the probable success of an advertisement. So in this case, consumer juries may be asked to rate selection of layout or copy version presented in pastes, like in cements, in molds, or else in separate sheets. So this advantage can be common for the comprehension and reaction testing for consumer juries, which means the first one is now we can control the result. The other one is it's cost effective because we select a few respondents that represent the customers, so we can minimize our resources. The other one is endorsement by independent third parties, achievements of credibility. When we see its disadvantage, consumer may be self-appointed expert. Sometimes the customers believe that they are experts. The other one is the number of advertisements that can be evaluated is limited, because they employ few or select few advertisement, or one advertisement, rough art or copy. Its result might be not conclusive or dependable. Preference for advertisement types may overshadow objectivity. Okay. The third stage is pre-testing finished ads. Now the advertisement is promoted or graduated to the pre-testing and finished ads. Now it becomes a finished ads. It's not a rough art or a pre-finished copy of commercial. Rather, now it's like a finished ads. But this research or this testing undertaken when before the advertisement is circulated to the society. So at this stage, the finished advertisement or commercial is used. So in this case, this is the most important stage. This is the most important pre-testing stage that researchers prefer to test, because the advertisement is in a final form, so they believe that it's a better test and they can avoid or rectify some problems before they actually embarking or disseminating the information to the society. So there are two broad categories of pre-testing here. The first one is pre-testing for finished print message, for print advertisements, and at the same time there is also a method for broadcasting advertisements. So for pre-testing finished print message, now we can employ portfolio testing, readability testing, dummy advertisement vehicle testing. In the flip side, for broadcasting pre-finished testing, we can apply theater tests, on-air tests, and psychological measure tests. Let's discuss this point one by one. The pre-testing finished print message. The first one is a portfolio testing. It's a laboratory methodology. So in this stage, we can design an artificial environment and then measuring whether the customers are recalling the message or not. So we undertake two major activities. The first one is we identify respondents and exposing those respondents to a portfolio of advertisements. or a number of advertisements. So within this advertisement there is an advertisement which is considered as a control advertisement. The other one is a test advertisement, which means mixing various advertisements with testing advertisement and the control advertisement. Whether the objective of the portfolio testing is just to test one advertisement, but they let the respondents or the customers to expose to various or a portfolio of advertisement. Then they are asked to indicate what information they recall from the ads. So in this case, the portfolio testing is applied to measure whether the customers may recall the advertisement message or not, which means it measures the memorability capacity of the customer. So the assumption is that if the ads that yields the highest recall are the most effective. So from the set of portfolio of advertisement, if they have the highest recall, that advertisement is the most effective advertisement to promote. When we see its merit portfolio testing, it offers the opportunity to compare the alternative advertisement directly, because there is a portfolio of advertisement. Sometimes the testing advertisement might be 2 or 3 among the portfolio of or the set of advertisement. Now we can measure the alternative strategies, which means we can select the best strategy among the others. The other one is sometimes there is so many uncontrolled factors that may increase the memorability of the ads. Sometimes people may recall the advertisement, a particular advertisement. It's because they have interest to that particular product that in the advertisement, or because the respondent know they participate in the test and interviewer reaction, the interviewer's instruction. The point is, yes, they might recall one advertisement among others, but they recall that advertisement because that product is their interest, or because they believe that they are in the research on the measurement process, so they may bias the results. The other one is recall may not be the best test method. Recalling is just memorizing or putting some information in the minds. Rather, according to the various researchers and authors, it is commendable to measure the recognizability of products, which means sometimes the customers might have low involvement in the products. They have low involvement to the products, but they can recall the product's name or the advertisement. But recalling is something, weak information that we brought from the customers. Rather, we need to measure their ability to recognize, which means detailed information about the brands or explanation about the brand. So in this respect, recall may not be the best test. So it becomes all the other limitation. The second method of pre-testing finished print advertisement message is readability test. So in this case, we are going to employ the methods of Flash Rudolph. The method is called Flash formula. So the method is designed to measure the communication efficiency of the copy in the print advertisement, just measuring the readability of the message that we disseminated or that we attached in the newspaper. So its objective is just to assess the readability of the copy by determining the average number of syllables per 100 words. Simply, we measure the effectiveness of our message, which means our print message, in terms of the length of sentences, in terms of the types of words we use. So if the sentences are short, and at the same time if the words are concrete and familiar with the reader, the readability test becomes very high. Or the message that we disseminate through the print media is effective or well comprehended, so that the customers can remind or recall the advertisements. The third method is dummy advertising vehicles. So in this case, this is also the other important method of pre-testing finished print advertisement. So here is the logic. The logic is, now a particular magazine which contains regular editorial features of interest to the reader are disseminated to the selected readers of that magazines. So in this case, the magazine editorials also disseminated with the test advertisement simultaneously. So in this case, the researcher or the one who tests the effectiveness of the message is distributing this magazine with the test advertisement to a selected sample respondent in predetermined areas. But he hides something here. Yes, they told to the readers that they have a plan to evaluate the editorial contents. They are not telling them that they are going to test the advertisement. Rather, they give them this magazine to measure their editorial contests and let them, the customers, to read the magazines. So within this magazine there is also the test advertisement. Then after reading and entirely completing the magazines, they also goes to the selected customers and interview on their reaction to the both editorial contents, and now they asked about the advertisement. So now they gather feedback about the editorial contents, and now the customers give a editorial contents evaluation, and at the same time they also provide feedback about the advertisement they see in the or they read in the magazines. So they measure its recall, its readership, and its interest generating capabilities of the advertisement. So they measure to what extent they recall it, one thing. The other one is even to what extent it have a readership. It grabs the attention of the readers and even generating the interest of the readers. So dummy vehicles means sending the message or sending the test advertisement with a typical editorial feature of the magazines, and then measuring to what extent they can recall or read and understand the message which is disseminated with the magazines. So when it's the advantage, dummy advertising vehicles, it provides a more natural setting than a portfolio testing, because when we talk about portfolio testing, it's a laboratory testing, but when it comes to this one, the customers feel they are in their home in the natural reading situation, so they may give you a genuine answer. When it comes to its disadvantage, the testing effect is not eliminated. Still, they believe that they are in the process of testing, and product interest may still bias the results. Even they are not, told to test or measure the effectiveness of advertisement, but still the product preference may grab their attention to read that advertisement in the bulletins or in the magazines. So the result might be bad. It's because they have interest to the product, and sometimes if they are not interested to the product is in the magazine, they are not going to even read it. So the result might be confused. The other one is it's not guaranteed measures of advertising impact. So it's very difficult to measure its impact, because they read a particular magazine, then within their reading activities they also visualize or read the advertisement message. So sometimes it's not a motivating factor to make a purchase decisions or strong impact on the customers. The other group is pre-testing finished broadcasting ads. Okay, to wrap up, the pre-testing finished print ads message. So in this case we study portfolio testing, readability testing, dummy advertising testing. The next discussion also focuses on pre-testing a finished broadcasting ads. Now the message type or the media becomes broadcasting ads. So there is theater, on air, and psychological measures here. So when it comes to the first one, the pre-testing finished broadcasting ads is theater testing. It looks like a theater because it is one of the most popular laboratory method for presenting finished commercial. Now we apply a laboratory method. Now participants are invited to view a pilots of proposed TV programs. Bear in mind, it's not a finished TV program, it's a pilot but it's proposed TV programs. They believe that they are just invited to watch a particular TV program production time. Then, just like any other typical invitation, they are going to watch the TV programs in the selected areas. So sometimes the companies may use 250 up to 600 participants in the theater in testing areas. So after they watching the proposed TV programs, which is embedded with the advertisement, now they are asked to answer some questionnaire to evaluate their evaluation about the advertisement they see in the proposed TV programs, and even they can also measure the whether the attractiveness of the proposed TV programs too. So after they watch the TV programs in that simultaneously, finally the research groups is going to distribute a questionnaire or an informers that the customers may fill their evaluation. The other one is on-air test. Theater test, the difference between these two things is, in the case of theater test, they test the advertisement in a pilots of proposed TV programs. When it comes to on-air test, it's inserted the finished commercial into the active or actual TV programs in the certain test market. The difference is that is the proposed TV programs, and when it comes to on-air tests, it is the actual TV programs. So typically the commercial is in a finished forms, although the test of ads earlier in the development process is becoming more common. So here again, in this stage, they are going to measure whether they recall the message they watch, the information they watch in the actual TV program or not. So that is the number of persons able to recall the advertisement's message is a good matrix to measure whether the advertisement is effective or not. So on-air tests are like that. So when we see its advantage and disadvantage, it's because it's a field methodology. It's earned the whole advantage of field methodologies and disadvantage too. For example, now the customers feel they are free from measurement because they are not in the laboratory or in the such confined environments, rather they are in their natural location. When you see its disadvantage, now it's very difficult to control various extraneous variables which affect the evaluation of the customers. But on top of that, when you see its advantage, according to various research results, it's a validity and reliable method. It's valid and reliable method. The other one is it also offers a lot of benefits compared to lab methods, which means the customers feel natural environment and they are not going to buy their results. This is the balance which happen from the confined or artificial environment. The last part is the psychological measures. The third, pre-testing finished broadcasting ads are psychological measures. So psychological measures involve a laboratory setting in which now the researcher or the one who is going to test measuring the psychological response of the respondent. So one of the peculiar characteristics of this method is the measures the receiver's involuntary responses. As of my prior discussion, when you are employing the laboratory methods to measure the response of the respondent, the environment looks artificial and sometimes the customers may buy the results. This method is something special that even the customers couldn't bias the output of their responses, because they use some developed technologies which avoids involuntary responses of the customers. That is, involuntary responses means it's like the heartbeats and the reflexes. The reflexes of the customers can be measured, and at the same time the heartbeat of the customer could not be controlled because the customer couldn't control his heartbeat. Sometimes whether we can speak that we are not interested about the advertisement, but in our heartbeat or in our heart or reflexes we love the advertisement. So we can avoid these kinds of confusing results or bad results by employing such advanced technologies. So it allows us to measure the receiver's involuntary responses and the advertisement, so we can avoid biases. Here again, we can use this method to use both print advertisement and broadcasting advertisements, but now we use this method for broadcasting advertisements. So in this case there are 4 types here. The psychological measures are pupil dilation, galvanic skin response, eye tracking, and brainwave methods. These 4 advanced technology based measurements is used to measure psychological measure of the customers. When it comes to the first one, it's a pupil dilation method. Now the researcher is using a pupillometric devices, so it is designed to measure the size of the subject's eyes pupils in response to the stimuli, measuring the subject eyes, the size of the subject eyes. So in this case, now we can come up with 2 results, whether there is a dilation or contraction. The eyes of the person may dilate or it become constrict. So the dilation in the constriction of the subjects after they are exposed to the advertisement tells us whether they are, understanding and have positive evaluation about the advertisement or not. So in this case, the stimuli might be advertisement, product, or package, because this method is applied for various methods, various subjects to measure. For example, pupil dilation method is used to evaluate product and package design, and at the same time we can also use this technology to test advertisement. So the concern of our today discussion is how we use a pupil dilation or pupillometric devices to test the advertisement. So in this case, we can come up with 2 results. The first one is the pupil dilation, the other one is constriction. So if the pupil dilation is concerned or measured in the devices, now the customers might have a stronger interest and preferences to the advertisement. And if their eyes are in the constriction, or if their pupils are in the constriction stage, they disinterest for the advertisement. For example, they use these kinds of methods or technologies. This is a pupil dilation camera. So after the customers were exposed, or when the customers are exposed to the advertisement, simultaneously this camera measure the dilation of the respondent's eyes and interpret its output in such way. If there is a dilation, pupil dilation, they are interested, and if there is a pupil contraction, they are not interested to the advertisement. So in this respect, this method have a lot of advantage, but despite its disadvantage, it's have a disadvantage, which means it have high costs because we use such kinds of technologies. They are costly, and at the same time they also create a methodological problems. One of the methodological problems is it's very difficult to interpret the result that we earn from these kinds of software, or we need a professionals to interpret the message or the result that we capture from the cameras or the technologies. The second one is a galvanic skin response, or GSR. Look, the first one, the first method, which means pupil dilation method, or is employed in one of the sense organ in our eyes. When it comes to the second one, the data which is gathered from the other parts of our senses, which means our skin. So using our skin as a source of gathering the responses of the customers or the response of the subject. So in this case here again we use electrodermal response, EDR, or GSR, galvanic skin response device. So this device is used to measure the skin resistance or conductance, and the skin resistance or conductance of the subject also respond for the stimuli by generating or activating its sweat gland. So as you know, we have a sweat gland in our dermal or in our skin. So in this case, we measure the response to the stimuli, which means the advertisement, and this advertisement might activate their sweat glands, which in turn increase the conductance of the electrical current. So if the customer have interests about the advertisement, or if they dislike the advertisement, their sweat glands, or the sweat that they measure from the skin of the subjects, tells that the customers are satisfied, or the customers are interested, or they are disinterested about the advertisements. So in this case here again, they use these kinds of device. The GSR devices looks like this. It measures the electrical flow of our dermals and the activation of sweat glands, and interpreting this figure into whether they are satisfied or not for the advertisement. So when you see its advantage, it's useful to determine the advertisement effectiveness. So it gives us a genuine information. If they are happy or if they are interested about our advertisement, we can come up with genuine results. But when you see its disadvantage, the method have resulted in an infrequent use at this time. They believe that this method is an old method, because currently there are developed neurological technologies which measure the effectiveness of advertisements. Okay, the third one is eye movement in eye tracking device. So as you see on the PowerPoint, here is the subject is installing the eye tracking camera in his eyes, and the role of this camera is just to track the beams which out from the eyes of the respondent. So these infrared lights might be counted or specifically measured by the eye tracking camera. So the camera is going to measure the following three major points: which elements of the advertisements are attracting attention. By watching the movement of the eyes, it can measure which parts of the advertisement that the customer is attracted. The other one is how long that the subject view that particular things in the advertisement, and at the same time sequences in which they are being viewed. So let me show you the results. For example, this is one spot that one measurement of the eye tracking of a particular subject. So in this case, they see the person sees 3% in the upper part of the screen. In the left side of the screen, he watched 7%, 11%, insert 3%. The other one is here again 5, 6%, and 90%. So according to the eye movement or eye tracking device, now the person may watch 33% to particular location, and he stay a long time in this area. So this tells that the customers or the subjects are interested about that thing. So in this case, we can measure these results into various or different respondents or subjects, and measure which area of our advertisement grabs the attention of our respondents, and then we can conclude our evaluation. So one of the quality of this method is we can measure the strength and weakness of our advertisement, which means which part of the message grabs the attention of the respondent. So sometimes the models may cover the message of the intents of our advertisement. Sometimes the physical appearance of the message, the models, the background color, and other things that we incorporate in particular message may distract the viewers' attention away from the product that we are going to advertise. Sometimes people may ignore the products and talk about the models attractiveness and else, and sometimes they forget about the message about the products and discuss about the color, the graphic, and other things. behind. So in this case we can rectify these kinds of problems, or we can avoid these kinds of problems. So most of the time they also employ these methods in website and online advertisements, measuring the eye tracking of the respondents. And the final step, the final method of psychological method, which means the final step of pre-testing finished broadcasting ads, is brainwaves. Now we also use the other devices. It is called electroencephalographic device. So this device is used to measure, can be taken from the skull to determine the electrical frequencies in the brain. Simply, these brain waves measure the brain wave activities, the electrical flow in the brain of humans. So in this case we can measure the alpha waves, and at the same time we can also measure the hemispheric lateralization, the left and the right side of brain electrical flows. When it comes to the alpha activity, for example, the first method of brain wave is alpha waves. So in this respect, alpha activity refers to the degree of brain activation. So to what extent the brain of the subject or the brain of the customer is active or not. So in this case, people's in alpha state, if someone is in the alpha state, his brain is inactive, his brain is resting and sleeping. Which means if a person is in the alpha state, they are less likely to process information. They are also less likely to get attention and recall information. The point is, now we are going to exposing our customers to particular message and then measuring their alpha state or their alpha level. So if their alpha level is very high after they are watching our advertisement, they want to avoid the message, because even though we are letting them to watch or follow our advertisement, but they are in the alpha state, which means their mind is inactive, resting and sleeping, which means they are not processing and recalling the message even though we are exposing them. The other one is, after all, we undertake this, which means exposing them to the advertisement and measuring their alpha level, and if their alpha level is very low, without any question, the customer is processing information. It also get their attention and recall, which means they can process the information, they recall it, because their mind is not in the inactive state. Their mind is in a resting, or it's not in a sleeping state. Just it's because the message is grabbing their attention, their alpha level becomes very low, and they are actively following our advertisement. The other method is hemispheric lateralization. So in this case, now we are going to measure the flow of electric or the flow of activities from the left and right side of the brain. So now our brains have these kinds of roles. For example, the right side of our brain processes visual stimuli. Most of the time the visual stimuli might be processed in our right brain, and the verbal stimuli also processed in our left side of the brain. The other one is the emotional. We are responding to emotional stimuli through our right side. It's something emotional. We respond to the right side, and we respond to logic from our left side of our mind, which means the right side is emotional, and it's also the left side deals with logic. The third is the right side of our minds determines recognition, which means understanding, comprehension. When it comes to the left side of our brain, it's responsible to recall, which means memorizing things. So considering the movements or considering the responsibility of our brains, now we are going to design our advertisement and measuring the way how they process the information in the right side of our brain and the left side of our brain. So most of the time here again we use these kinds of devices and measure after the customers are watching the advertisement video, or else we are going to measure their brain waves, and measuring the left side and the right side of their brains, or the hemispherical lateralization of their brains, and then understanding that now the message is processing their left side of the customers or the right side minds of their customers, and broughting our conclusion, and using these kinds of devices. Okay, the last stage is market testing of the advertisement, or post testing. So in this case, the previous 3 steps were undertaken before the message is disseminated to the society in an actual scene. But now we are going to measure the effectiveness of our advertisement even the message is disseminated to the society, or after the message is actually disseminated to the society. So by undertaking the 4th stage, we can realize 2 things. The first one is we can measure whether we are achieving our objective or not. The other one is we can take inputs here, because it is a post-testing method. So in this case, one of the rationale behind the post-testing was in the pre-testing, the sample size becomes very small, and most of the time they employ focus group discussion, like selecting 10 up to 12 people in some methods. Sometimes they take about 60 up to 300 up to 60 respondents. But in market testing of the advertisement, which means the post-testing method, now we are going to take a large number of respondents to measure the effectiveness of the advertisement. So in this case, here again there are 2 broad categories of testing. Post-testing for print advertisement, there is inquiry testing, recognition tests, and recall tests. So they measure its inquiry, recognition, and recall. When it comes to the broadcasting commercials, they have to recall tests, persuasion measure, diagnostics, test marketing, and tracking studies might be applied here. Finally, this is the last part of the 5th chapter. Now I'm going to discuss about the essentials of effective testing. So when we are talking about an effective testing, our testing activities must fulfill the PACT guidelines. As I said earlier, the PACT have 9 guidelines. Considering those 9 guidelines, we can come up with a better results. But on top of that, we also focus on the following 5 major points. The first one is, when we are talking about testing or undertaking a test in our advertisement programs, first we have to establish a communication objective. We undertake the testing activities to measure whether our campaign is effective or not. So to measure the effectiveness of our advertisement, first we have to have a standard or an objective that we are going to achieve. This objective might be in a communication form, or it can be in the sales form, but it becomes a very critical input to undertake the test here. The other one is use a consumer response model. This also stated in the PACT guidelines. So as you already learned in the 2nd chapter, there are models that a marketer is going to understand how their customers respond to the message. So in this case, there are 3 more models: hierarchy models, like the traditional hierarchy, the hierarchy model, and the cognitive model. So we need to apply one of those models that gives us a framework to study how the customers respond to our advertisement, and basing our researches on some scientific models. The other one is use pre-tests and post-testings. To avoid costly mistake, we need to undertake pre-testing, which means we need to test the advertisement before it's circulated to the society, and we can minimize or rectify some costs, and at the same time we can also rectify the message sometimes which have a negative connotation in the results to the society. The other one is we need to apply post-tests, which means we need to measure whether the advertisement is effective or not in properly achieving its objective. The third one is use multiple measures. Bear in mind, as a good researchers, and to come up with reliable and valid results, we need to undertake a measurement in multiple measures. One-time measures is not conclusive. So in this case, we have to measure the customer responses in various situations, in various times, in various locations, and then we can bring or come up with conclusive results. And finally, we need to understand and implement proper research. This is the most critical elements of undertaking an effective evaluation. So we need to understand the research methodologies, which methodology is feasible to our research and our objective. At the same time, we need to apply valid and genuine methodologies or research designs, the sample size, the sampling techniques, the method of data collections, and the things that we are going to study needs to be measured or identified based on the fundamentals of research principles or methods. So understanding and implement proper research becomes the other critical input to come up with an effective testing or conclusive and valid testing. So thank you for your listening. So if you have any question or any idea about on the 5th chapter, I'm ready to deal with. So you can send those questions or concerns through the university LMS, which means Learning Management System, and I can deal with your questions and concerns about the discussion that we have made on the 5th chapter. Thank you.